can't think of any more human activity than conducting science experiments.
The game I play is a very interesting one. It's imagination in a tight straitjacket.
The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together.
What I always think should be the basis of education is not answers, but questions. We should teach kids how to question.
This is BLab Codes. My name's Amit Siddiqui. In this abridged episode, Britney talks about how she's using her higher research degree, the PhD that she's working on, to get into an investigative role with law enforcement. She's literally using her PhD to become Sherlock Holmes. To listen to the full version, go to blabcodes.com and subscribe to our podcast through whatever podcast app you use.
I mean, long term, I'm very interested in detective and investigative work, and I think psychology and what's so-called hard sciences, I guess it's not the correct term for it, I guess, but physics, chemistry, biology. I just think those two marry so nicely in a field that deals with investigative work. So just recently, I've been reconsidering going back. I mean, at the same time, though, I could go back and I'd want to do anything, I've tossed up between sciences or computing science even.
Wow.
And but it's interesting, that we've both got the divergent path going on.
It almost feels like you have too many options. You don't know which one to choose.
Yeah, and I think, we didn't really discuss that earlier when we were talking about choices at that young age, when you sort of might be considering first going to uni. But I think for myself and a lot of my friends, we had that experience of just having quite a few choices. And it wasn't a matter of, people in high school always said, oh, just do something you're interested in. And we were like, what if I'm interested in 20 things on an equal playing field, So it's interesting, what leads us to where we are and making those choices, which can be so final, at the end of the day. It's probably too complex to detail right now, but it's interesting.
Definitely. So in your undergrad, you did a Bachelor of Psychology.
Yes.
Why did you decide to get into research and not become a practicing psychologist or a psychiatrist?
Yeah. There's kind of a couple of different reasons, but it just boils down to I don't think I'd be particularly suited to the work clinical psychologists or psychiatrists do on a day-to-day basis. I'm not somebody that can sit down and talk to people, and I don't think I think I would struggle with conversations.
You're doing a great job right now. You're on the podcast.
Exactly. So I think there was that aspect of it didn't appeal to me,
Sure.
The actual work. I'm very, very interested in helping people. I just don't think that was my particular calling. And I think for me, the ultimate decision to go into research was, like I said, I'm very interested later on in going into some sort of investigative field of work, which I'm not sure what that might be, but maybe with government agencies or policing, I'm not even sure, to be honest. And if you look up the sorts of jobs that are in investigative work, a research degree and a higher research degree is what they recommend. So that's what led me here.
I see. So you're using essentially this research path to ultimately get to an investigative type of work where you're combining psychology with some other field to essentially become Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, I think so. It's interesting. It's like returning to the original the original sort of reason for starting on this journey, I guess. Exactly. I mean, I don't know exactly if Sherlock Holmes' job exists in the real world, but
you could be the first one.
Yeah, exactly. I think some form of consultant would be amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know, I've toyed with the idea of forensic linguistics before. I don't know whether you've learned much about that.
I'm not familiar with forensics linguistics. Tell me about it.
It's just there's many different aspects, but one aspect of it is when language evidence, whether it's text talk, is submitted as part of court proceedings. Getting in expert witnesses who deal with language in a forensic capacity is one of the areas it deals with. So determining authorship, who spoke or wrote particular documents. And, the content of, threat emails, threat letters, that sort of thing.
Wow.
So it's an idea that I'm toying with, going into consulting in some capacity like that.
That is very cool, actually. So you figure out so if you have someone in mind and then you're trying to determine if this letter was written by that person,
Yeah.
and you need a forensic linguist to do that.
Yeah, it's and I mean it's sort of been used very traditionally in basic profiling as well. So determining, you know, if there's a written letter, for example, who the author might be, like what their characteristics might be, like depending on the language it's written in, spelling mistakes even, what's a common spelling mistake versus what's an uncommon spelling mistake, like might have been put there deliberately to mislead police, that sort of thing.
Wow.
So yeah, it's I'm learning more and more about it too. I'm sure if there's any forensic linguists listening to this, they might sort of have different opinions of what the field is, but that's my understanding and sort of where I could see myself fitting in.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That is really cool, actually. Yeah, I never considered that. I thought those sort of jobs just existed in the movies, but no, they actually exist in real life.
Yeah, it's very niche and very specialist, but yeah, it's a possibility. So
Right. Okay. We've kind of touched on this already with you. Actually, I'll leave that for later. Let's just go from undergrad. So you've decided to do a research degree. So
Yeah.
did you do an honors or a PhD? Honors or a master's of philosophy?
I did an honours research component to my undergrad degree, which is a common pathway in psych. Although I believe it's being sort of overrun by now you do a master's degree in place of that is like the new kind of thing to do. I don't know, people listening might know better than me. So yeah, I did an honours research thesis as part of my undergraduate degree, and then I did a research internship and then went on to do a PhD.
I see. How did you figure out what you wanted to do for research?
The specific topic,
Yep.
you mean?
Or even the supervisor? How did you find your supervisor? Why did you choose to go with the supervisor that you had in your honors?
So the topic area, I think, made that decision for me. Apart from I had a really good experience with my honours supervisor and wanted to keep her on my panel. There's the PhD supervisor as well. I chose I've got 3 supervisors on my PhD panel, and I chose them based on, which is quite common, you know, they have to be qualified in what you want to do. And so that's how I sort of located them, and yeah, that's how they came to be my supervisors, was they studied the topic area I was interested in.
Okay, let's get into your topic area a little bit.
Yeah.
We've kind of been dancing around it, but I would like to hear more about it, and if you could tell us what you're researching, it would be good.
Yep, so my research falls within social psychology, so a subdiscipline under the broad branch of psychology. And even more specifically, it falls under the field of social perception. So it's how we form impressions of concepts of other people, you know, individuals, but also other groups. So it deals with stereotyping and those sorts of, you know, impression formation processes. My particular topic area looks at how we form concepts or sort of knowledge networks of unfamiliar groups, and specifically outsider groups. So those are groups which either by themselves or the government have been positioned as being outside of, you know, conventional society. So I look at outlaw motorcycle gangs and hacking collectives such as Anonymous, and asylum seekers as well. And so there's a bit of a story, I guess, as to how I came to research that, if you're interested in it.
Yeah, please tell us.
Yeah, so around the time I was considering doing the PhD, I was reading a book called Hell's Angels by Hunter S Thompson. I don't know whether you've heard
I've heard of Hunter S Thompson, yeah.
So apart from being one of my favourite authors, this was one of my favourite books. And I don't know, just for the listeners, I guess I detail that so the premise of his work, so it's a journalistic account of the Hells Angels in the 1960s in California, when the outlaw motorcycle gangs first kind of came to the fore of American society. And as a reader, what I found I came out with was a very different impression of outlaw motorcycle gangs as compared to what I'd thought previously of them. And it got me thinking, like, hang on, I actually know nothing about this group, yet I have a concept of what a bikie gang is.
Right.
And at that time, bikie gangs were particularly central in Australian media and politics. So this was around 2013, 2014. And there were lots of impressions floating around in the media, but also in everyday conversations I overheard, you know, people talking about these gangs. And yeah, it just made me think, I was like, how can you form a concept or an impression of a group that you don't really know. And, what influences that impression? Where does the information come from? And what mental processes might underlie that? So is that a good enough explanation?
That's a very good explanation.
Yeah.
And so what I'm curious. Check out our podcast on blabcoats.com. Subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you find your podcast by looking up Blab Coats.